From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John. This is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. With me this week is the man who is the arbiter of draft therapy. His favorite flavor of mom is Linda. With me is Shaun. Shaun, how are you doing today?
Yeah, my back is not good, but other than that, I'm good.
Who needs a back? Who needs support to be able to do things like stand or...
That's overrated. Standing, walking, those things are overrated.
Recliners have gone really nice in this century.
That's true. Last century, they were total dog shit, but 21st century,
holders.
Yeah. I mean, what the hell? I don't even have a reason to get up anymore.
That just made me think of the episode of The Simpsons where Homer's in it trying to be Thomas Edison, and he basically connects a toilet to the recliner. And Bart immediately goes, "Out of my way, gotta poop." So,
I won't be doing that on my recliner, but
it just seems like all kinds of gross on like so many levels.
Don't eat where you poop.
What have you been up to this week?
I walked to Chicago, and boy, is my back tired. No, I didn't walk there, but I was in Chicago last week for a couple days, just getting out of town. We thought that we were going to be going the week before Lollapalooza, but it ended up that we were there the week of Lollapalooza, which it wasn't actually all that busy. I mean, it was busy. Chicago's very busy anyways, but
sure,
just on Michigan Avenue, like by Millennium Park, it was busier because it was Lollapalooza was right there. But yeah, it was a good time. I told you before we started, I've been having back problems for a couple of years now, and it like came to a total head on the vacation. We kind of checked out a couple. I'm a big museum person. I like to go to museums, art museums, and we went to the Field Museum, and in the museums I was rolling around in a wheelchair, so that was fun. That was a little humbling, but it was a lot better. I was probably in a lot better mood riding around in a wheelchair than I would have been sitting every 10 seconds and being a total festering asshole. But yeah, other than that, drive was good. You don't realize how big that city is. You know, you come to Detroit and we have the downtown. That's pretty much what we have. And there's Midtown and, other little pockets of town, quote unquote, that you might want to stop at. But you go to Chicago and it's like, this is a massive city. It's so dense, like densely populated. Traffic's shit. When you come here, you're like, I'll be at your house. You live in a mile away, and I'll if I drive my car, I'll be there in 45 minutes.
Right.
So, but other than that, it was cool.
It's always interesting to me how like big cities like Chicago or New York or Boston feel so they feel so big, but like as far as like real estate or area, they're almost like very small and compact in comparison to like how Detroit is so sprawled out.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird thing, but Chicago's cool. Hate their hockey team, but other than that, they're cool.
Yeah, I don't like their sports teams at all. But
I have no hate for the Cubs, but other than that, I agree with you.
Yeah, but Cubs are like everybody likes if you're not from Chicago and you like a Chicago baseball team, you like the Cubs. You don't like the White Sox. But the White Sox, the thing that bothers me about the White Sox is when you look at any kind of merch, like I look at hat drops, like New Era hats or 47 or whatever, and they always have a Chicago White Sox variant, but they will not never, but almost rarely, like in the really special colorways or whatever that they might just do certain teams, the Tigers get the short end of the stick, and the Tigers have like an iconic logo that's, it's not a New York Yankees logo, but it's pretty recognizable, iconic.
I don't think it's that drastically different from the Yankees logo.
Yeah, but New York Yankees logo is
not
like
New York. Yeah.
Yeah, you see that all over the world.
But I think the same thing goes for the Yankees and Detroit and the Dodgers and stuff. There's certain like baseball caps that you're wearing just as much, you're wearing that just as much to represent the city as you are the actual team that's on top of that hat. Like,
or even just the colors. I mean, the Yankees, the Tigers, LA, blue and white. I mean, that's pretty, and the Tigers and the Yankees are pretty dark blue. The Detroit Tigers, the blue on that is almost so dark that it's black, so it kind of can go with black. Yeah. So I get that. Pizza. I had pizza. That was good.
Do you like Chicago style pizza?
Oh, I really like it, but I think the reason I really like it is because I don't get to have it that much. Whereas if I lived there and it was like the thing that everybody, Chicago pizza's the best, I'd probably be really over it.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Chicago pizza. It's basically pizza soup to me. and I'm kind of good with that. It's
Pizza
just
soup.
like it's way too much damn cheese, way too much. It's just too much of everything. I'm very much so like I could do a thin crust every now and then, which is not Chicago. I could do New York style. I do like Detroit style, and I'm very happy to eat that the majority of the time.
Mhm.
But if I was in Chicago, I'm sure there's plenty of pizza spots that make non-Chicago style pizza too, but given the options, I'd be like, you know what, I'm just going to stick with like a Domino's round because at least it's not like 5 billion pounds of cheese on top of, sausage and pepperoni, and sounds kind of good now, but
Right.
it's not.
Yeah, I didn't shit like the whole time we were there because of the pizza. We got
I would
pizza the
think
first
that's
night.
It's probably why your back hurts so much because you
Maybe.
didn't shit the whole time you were there.
Well,
So-
it hurt before we got there. But we had pizza the first night. We were there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I think I ate a piece of this pizza that we had gotten every day. So every day was just this block of cheese.
That's a rough go.
Had a lot of Mexican food though, really good Mexican food. So no complaints there.
It's
for
always
me.
a good thing.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to catch anything movie or TV wise aside from our topic this week?
The French. I can't think. I'm sure I watched something. I know I watched something last night, and I think because I was watching Shaun of the Dead, I've been just keeping up on the same old crap that I've been watching. I don't think I watched anything real noteworthy.
I made a point of powering through, and I think I've told you this off Mike at some point that I was eventually going to give American Horror Story 1984 a try because although I didn't really like the other seasons, I was like, well, I really like slasher movies, and this is supposed to be like their take on the slasher genre.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ, what a wasted 9 fucking hours or whatever it was to watch it. I mean, it does have a lot of redeeming qualities. Like there's points in it when they're doing a kill, like their kills are by horror movie standards or horror show standards, I guess, pretty good. They go over the top on the gore for what they can on. I'm assuming that was on like just basic cable.
I think it used to be on ABC. If it's the new one, I think it's on Hulu. I don't know if it actually even goes on regular TV.
Amazon Prime right now.
Oh, okay.
I can't imagine that would be on ABC.
American Horror Story was definitely on ABC.
No, that doesn't seem right. Because if this was a movie, it'd be a hard R. Like there's no because it's on TV, they cut away all the nudity stuff, which they hint at pretty heavily. But the gore alone would get this a hard R.
What year did that come out?
There's this 2019, I think it said. It's season 9. I could be wrong on the year, but I know it's season 9.
Season 9.
The thing that I don't like about it is instead of trying to, one, if you're going to make a story that's a slasher story, it sure as hell doesn't need to be 9 episodes long. Unless your runtime is 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be 9 episodes long. 5, maybe. 6 is probably pushing it, but 9, it's oh, God, let's fucking get through this. But then they mix in ghost story and this bizarre, spoilers if you haven't watched this, I don't really care. I should spoil this for you. Maybe it will save you some time. It's got this weird B plot with the Night Stalker, with someone actually playing Richard Ramirez in it, who kind of turns into the A plot somewhere around episode 4 or 5, but then disappears for a while and then comes back to be the main and villain or antagonist. I'm not really sure by the end of it. And I'm fine with watching movies that show real life serial killers as some kind of accurate retelling of their story, whether it's a documentary or Zodiac, how they did it with Fincher's retelling of it, which is probably more fiction than documentary. Sure. I would say. Yeah. But it's still it's not taking leaps and bounds away from what the story was, as far as we know. This is just if you're going to make this shit up about a guy who actually existed, why not just make a fictional character? You could base it off the Night Stalker. I mean, how many people have been based off of fucking Ed Gein? Yeah. Yeah. As loosely as that can be. You could base it off of him and tell the same story with a fictional character that's not actually him. It's really bad. Maybe this is just me getting old, but I'm I don't know why, but him being a main character in this movie just feels it's in really bad fucking taste to me.
Yeah, it was on FX, not ABC.
Okay, so that's basic cable, right?
Yes.
Or essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I don't like about, just kind of go back to your point about the 9 episodes thing, when the age of prestige television came on with Breaking Bad and Sopranos, like HBO stuff, especially, because those usually went like 10 episodes. I know you said this was 9 hours, so 9 episodes, but I can't, maybe it was 10 with commercials, or was it just straight 9 episodes?
No, there's some episodes that are like 45 minutes. There's some that are closer to like 30. And the ones that are 30 feel like a real breath of fresh air. And it I don't think they had a strict runtime or they just jammed a shitload of commercials in there. Mm-hmm. Neither would surprise me. But it feels like it was an hour time slot because it certainly has points where I don't know. I've only watched like a handful of episodes of this show prior to this season. I don't think I ever got through a whole season before, but it sure feels like they have like a rule of like, okay, we have to have at least 6 plot twists per an episode, regardless if it's a plot twist that progresses the story, is interesting, or for that matter, even makes sense, So they're really, really ramming that down your throat. Like, my wife was in the other room laughing because I would be sitting there just like, what the fuck was that? Why, straight up like yelling, kind of like it, I was in mid football season 4, and even though I'm watching a stupid show that's kind of about a slasher style movie. Oh, the other thing that really pissed me off too is they didn't just like borrow from, they straight up ripped off Friday the 13th in it, which has been done, but to do it to the extent where it's like, oh, well, this kid died, so here comes the mom back to go kill everyone. Like, that's there for like one episode. And they almost shot for shot remake like Jason popping out of the lake. And anyone who's ever seen Friday the 13th is going to see that scene coming by like a mile, because you already know, like, kid died in the lake, mom's already gone crazy, she's killing people, blah, blah, blah. Oh, this guy's floating out here in a boat. I wonder what's going to happen. And sure enough, it does.
Yeah, I can never go back to network TV with the 32 episodes or whatever, hour-long episodes. I remember I tried to get into Fringe when my kids were born, and because they nap so much, when they're really small, it was easy because I could watch an episode or two with all the commercials cut out. But, there's like 4 or 5 seasons of the show, and there's 100 episodes to watch. Like, I don't have 100 hours, or I don't have 100... times 45 minutes to 4,500 hours, whatever, minutes. Jesus.
Right.
Yeah, my math is really good. And that's not even good math because whatever. But I don't have the time to invest in watching something that long. It has to be really good. Like, really good.
It's actually one of the few things I'll really give Disney credit for, like what the shows they're doing right now. And the only one that I've watched really recently was that Obi-Wan show. But that show, I think it was only 6 episodes, and there was no like strict runtime. It felt like the concept was tell enough of the story to make this like a chapter and then finish it. Like, they didn't necessarily have to drag it out to the point. It's Disney and it's Star Wars. You could drag that out for like easily 40 episodes if you really wanted to, but thankfully you didn't, and
well, it's only one season
so far.
Right. Exactly.
I'm sure there'll be plenty others, but I mean, that's what I've noticed with more of these, because Netflix does this too with like, at least they have done this or they've been better about it. They don't always have like a strict format of it has to be 10 episodes or it has to be a 30-minute clip or whatever the case is. It feels like it's getting a lot more, especially now that there's no time slots and advertising's totally different. Tell the story the right way and make a good product. Hopefully. Yeah,
you're there for the story ultimately anyways, so it doesn't, if it's a 5 episode, if it's a 3 episode, hour long, show, then if that's what fits and you can tell the story from the start to the end, then just do that.
Right. And in the case if you're trying to make a show out of a slasher movie, you probably don't need that much of a story to begin with. Let's just, there's only like 9 main characters, which is about average for like your, slasher story. They killed off like 4 of them in the first episode. I'm like, how the fuck is this going to be 9 episodes? I was expecting like 1 kid to die an episode or something like that and move towards like whatever their finale was. Yeah, that's not what happens at all. So
I've never watched the show. It's an anthology thing, right? Every season is a new set of characters. And do they have like self-contained episodes at all, or is it always going towards that
I think it's always a theme per season. And I guess this is the season that kind of strays because a lot of times they reuse the same cast for different seasons, for better or worse. But I know they did a season on clowns, so I'm sure you would be all about that.
Oh, yeah.
They did I think they did one on another Richard Ramirez thing, the Cecil Hotel. I think they did a whole season on that. I'm sure they've done Aliens, and I think they did a Witchcraft one year too. I don't know, but they basically take like a theme for the season and just kind of carry that on for, I guess, 9 episodes, and then the next season is something different. Which I think we've both said this a couple times. Like, we like the idea of anthology series; that's a good thing. But I'm not 100% sure this show's pulling it off right.
I've never even watched a single episode. I know my sister was into it for a short amount of time, but I don't know if she still watches it, and she's not really a horror person at all. So I would think that whatever she was watching must have been pretty tame, or she's turned into a complete psychopath in her old age. So I don't know. I mean, that could be true too.
I wouldn't be surprised if season 1 is pretty G-rated in comparison to where it was by season 9, because just with where cable TV has gone in that roughly 10 years, wouldn't shock me at all if you're looking at the difference between like a, Ernest Scared Stupid versus like, Plague of the Zombies or something. So,
yeah, it did start in 2011. I mean, that was 11 years ago at this point. So yeah, like you said, a lot's changed since 2011 into where we are with TV now.
Yeah. You know what predates all of that, though, is the topic of this show, which you already said. We're talking about Shaun of the Dead this week. So Shaun of the Dead is well, actually, before we go into that, did we have anything else to kind of bullshit on before we got into our topic?
Nope.
Many words. I like it. Shaun of the Dead is a horror comedy movie that came out in 2004, something like that. It is the first of the Cornetto trilogy, which we'll probably cover those other 2 at some point, but this one's kind of the most easy one for us to cover because it's really just a well done zombie movie that happens to be really funny. This is, if I remember right, the first of Edgar Wright's films to really make him like, I don't know if it made him a household name, but it definitely made him on the radar as far as being like a known director. He had stuff before this, like he was in did a show called Space, which also starred Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And I want to say he had another film before this, but it definitely didn't hit the same level of success that this did. And really, at the end of the day, it's right on the poster. This is a romantic comedy with zombies, is the concept of this movie. Out the gate, we'll go ahead and tell you if you haven't seen this, I'm not going to really avoid spoilers on this one because it's as many great things as you can say about this movie. I wouldn't say it's thought-provoking or expect like massive like plot twists or anything. It's kind of right down home plate as far as what you would expect for a zombie movie. So there's no huge plot twists in it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty fair. There's nothing that really happens that you're like, oh no, this happens, because while it's a horror film, while it's a zombie film, and while it's it's a comedy, there's just so much stuff that happens that's really lighthearted. I mean, it really is the first movie that I can think of, first movie of the 2000s at least, that really played up to the horror, but also the comedy of what could happen in a zombie apocalypse. I mean, it doesn't take itself too seriously at all. I mean, there's parts where after they encounter their first zombie, they're throwing records at it to try to eliminate it. So, that should tell you something. They're throwing toasters and random things they find around the house. But they also don't even seem like
they're 100% aware of the fact that it's a zombie that they're dealing with. They just think she's drunk.
Yeah, well, the second one,
they see the news report. Yeah,
when they're grouped up together, the woman and the fat guy, they're kind of, oh my God, because the second one they meet is a little bit more torn up than the woman is. But yeah, it's super lighthearted. It's not. Mm-hmm. It is serious in a way. There are serious things that happen, but it's not. It doesn't take itself too seriously, thankfully.
Did you get to see this one in a theater when it came out, or did you just wait for video on it?
I think I was trying to think about that earlier. I've seen it a lot on DVD or whatever at the time, probably around 2005. I didn't see this when it came out, and I'm trying to think of how I heard about it. I think I had just heard that it was really funny, or I knew somebody that had seen it or something. My roommate at the time, I think we kind of watched it together. So I've seen it several times, but I didn't see it in the theater. I don't think I did.
I do remember seeing this in a theater because I don't remember what I saw ahead of it, but they actually had a poster up in the theater for it. And this movie didn't get a lot of like advertisement until probably into its second run in the theater, because I think dollar theaters were still kind of like hanging on by their last thread at that point. But it definitely didn't come out the gate like getting a ton of press. But once it kind of picked up that this is a really great movie, start seeing around. But I remember seeing this on opening weekend just because I was like, I don't know who these guys are. At the time, the idea of a romantic comedy with zombies, I was like, now that sounds super cliched, like something we've probably seen 100 times. But at that point, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this. The closest thing I can think of that's a comedy with zombies is Return of the Living Dead. And I sure love that movie. So I imagine this will at least be mildly entertaining. And I actually expected it to lean into the comedy side of the movie a lot more. Like, I expected it to be more, and it's not to say that it's not any of these things, but I expected more slapstickness to it and kind of more like, almost like a Jim Carrey approach to a zombie movie for whatever reason. And they probably could have gotten away with that and been like moderately successful. But what they do right on this, I mean, they really lean into the practical effects, making the zombies look really good. And whether you want to believe that this is how like a zombie apocalypse would play out or not, that's kind of silly either way and irrelevant. But it plays off really believable that these two idiots would just kind of stagger through London in the middle of this like apocalypse and have shenanigans ensue.
When you were saying that you were expecting it to be a little bit more and you're kind of looking for the word that instantly came to mind for me that I thought this would be is definitely more slapstick. And it does have some of those kind of elements to it, but it's not like Three Stooges over the top slapstick. And the other thing, I think this movie really took off. Like you said, it didn't have a whole lot of marketing. I don't remember it having a whole lot of marketing, but I think this one took off more.
I remember it after it came off. Like, you know how movies used to get their, like, before it came out marketing, and then when they're like, oh, people are seeing this, they would put out, like, a trailer.
Yeah, with, like, reaction shots or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those.
Yeah, I want to say, for me, it was definitely more of a word-of-mouth thing. I don't think I remember seeing too much of the actual marketing for it, more than people saying, oh, have you seen this? You know, like, oh, I know you're into movies, zombie movies, horror movies, whatever. Have you seen this? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is. I think that's how it went. I mean, it was 2004. That was a lifetime ago. Right. But yeah.
It was many mom waters ago.
Yeah. A whole shit ton of mom waters ago.
A whole bunch of Karens, a whole bunch of Lindas.
Yeah. Lots of Sandys, Julies, just a ton of them. But yeah, I think
Julie even made her way in there.
Yeah. I think it just really took off more of like a cult film. I think that
right.
I don't know how successful this was at the box office. I'm a bad podcast host because I don't know that, and I probably should have researched it ahead of time. But I don't think it made a whole lot of money, at least in the U.S. Upon release. But I think it really took off in home video or DVD sales or rentals or whatever.
It did pretty good. I mean, for this kind of movie, it had so it's using the conversion for what's on IMDb, it had roughly a $3,300,000 budget, which is pretty low budget at that time for what this movie turned into. And it grossed worldwide $30,097,000. In the US alone, it did $13 million. So, and I would imagine the other half of that is probably heavily in England because this is a British comedy.
Right.
I don't know if that gross includes like DVD and streaming rights and all that type of stuff that comes well after, but it certainly did make its money back, to say the least. And, you know, in 2004, you still had a point where you could get a comedy movie that had like a $3 million budget, and it was considered a huge success if it made $20-30 million.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
So we should probably backtrack because we haven't even really said what the plot line of the story is. We've kind of danced around it a little bit, but what this movie's really about is essentially you're looking at a guy whose name is Shaun, and much like our host or co-host, whatever you want to be this week. Anyway, Shaun's basically going through a breakup with his girlfriend, Liz. He's kind of in a rut of his life, and his roommate, Ed, who is played by Nick Frost, who is one of my personal heroes in cinema because he's just great in everything, is basically a stoner, like stays home all the time. Like, we've all had one of these in our life type roommates. That's just, he's fun to be around, but he is utterly fucking hopeless.
And maybe it was one of us. You never know.
No, I've always had, I haven't been that, sadly, or thankfully.
Or yeah, for better or for worse.
All right. So anyway, these two go to the pub to try to drink Shaun's woes away. And over the course of really the first act of this movie, you're seeing signs of people that might or might not be becoming the undead. They're all things up until the first bar scene where they could just be really strange people. They could just be Brits, or they could be the living dead. There's like a real fine line it walks of trying to kind of hide that from you until, the real big reveal.
Yeah, you see a lot of the signs in the newspapers that they show, or in like the news reports that they switch, that they turn off. But there becomes a very clear line as to when they are totally oblivious to it and when things really start to get bad. Like it really happens overnight. They kind of wake up and they realize that, that's when they meet their first, not the first zombie they actually see, but the first one that they recognize as actually being a zombie.
Right. I do love when they're before they've really put it together, when Shaun wakes up and staggers to the couch and he's flipping through channels, and everything they've seen just pieces together this perfect story of what's going on. It's really the only time I've ever been okay with the use of the Smiths in any circumstance, but
Panic on the streets of London.
Yeah. It's a really well done little clip of channel surfing where it tells you exactly what's happening, and then kind of right at that point, that's where just things go drastically downhill.
Right.
So
yeah, I really love that part, that little montage with the switching of the channels to piece together news, either things happening on TV or news broadcasts, and eventually it becomes all news broadcasts that tell you, like they just lay out, hey, this is what's going on, or at least this is what we think is going on, because it's so early and so kind of chaotic.
Right. And it's there's so many little clever things in this movie that this movie's written by both Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, but there's so many little things like that are kind of sprinkled in through this movie. It's not only like clever, it's straight up damn ingenious for this kind of movie, because like we said, we both went into this expecting it to be really slapsticky, and that type of joke in there is a far cry. It's funny. It's funny as hell, but it is not a slapstick type of joke.
Yeah, they just really sprinkle these little clever things throughout the entire movie. Things where it's a serious situation.
You got right on you gag.
Yeah. There's like a serious situation, but it's always tempered with this comedic thing, and vice versa. It's this really good ebb and flow, give and take of the serious and the comedic things that happen. There's a scene that I can think of. This is like this movie is the first time I can remember seeing Bill Nighy. And he looks, and the thing I was thinking about when I was watching this movie is, I've seen him in stuff since, right? He's been in, he seemed to pop up all over the place. Of these movies. Yeah, and he seems to have popped up all over the place overnight. Like, I don't know if I remember a time before I knew who he was, but I don't remember a movie before this one seeing him and thinking, he's so young. He looks, or I always thought he was really old, but he looks really young, in comparison to now. And there's a scene, Shaun gets a call from his mom and says that there was a bit of a scuffle while Philip was washing his car, and some hoodlums attacked him or whatever, basically, and he got bit. So Shaun and Ed devise this plan to go rescue their mom, or his mom, not their mom. Lots of mom jokes too. And they get to the house, and Philip is sitting in this chair, and he's kind of got his eyes closed, and you're expecting that he may be a zombie, and Shaun has to figure out how he's going to deal with this. And he says some off-color thing like, "Oh, how am I gonna deal with this?" Basically, and
so I'm so sorry, Philip.
Right? Yeah. And Philip is like, "Sorry for what?" He's like totally conscious. He's awake. He's just sitting there. It's just stuff like that where
the lead up to that scene is some of the best stuff in that movie. Like, I love the fact that you go back like maybe 2 minutes in movie time, when he's on the phone with his mom still, and she tells him that he got a little bitey, and he just kind of puts his hand over the receiver of the phone. And yes, there was a point where for kids at home, there was a point where you could cover part of the phone and people wouldn't hear you. He covers part of the phone, and he says to Ed, he goes, "Oh, we might have to kill Philip." He's like, "Oh," just moves on all nonchalant about it.
Right.
But so this kind of leads into the second part of the movie the second act of the movie, where they basically develop this plan to be able to get to a place where they can be safe and survive what they assume is just this, like,
one night
short term, like,
kind of like what we thought with COVID.
Which,
Just be a week, no
very
big
much
deal.
so.
You know, no, nothing serious.
And the great thing about, I mean, one, their plan is very much so like, I'm like, God, this is probably the kind of dumbass thing I would do is I would just go to the bar and hide there because they have food and, you know, whatever. But what's great about it is when you're watching them, because they're assuming they have to kill Shaun's stepfather at this point, and he becomes more and more like not just comfortable, but like just fine with, you know, murdering his stepdad as he goes through this like progression of explaining their plan.
Yeah, when they explain the plan, they do these
hysterical
cuts. They do these cuts where it's like, okay, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then it's all going to work out. And the first time they kind of off Philip, and it's like they clang him. You know, it's a little bit more of it's like a 3-second
it's more
scene.
dramatic.
Yeah, and then it becomes like a half a second thing that, we're just going to take care of him, and then we're going to move on.
Well, it's funny because it goes like from, I'm so sorry, Philip, to sorry, Clunk.
Right. Yeah.
And it's also one of the first times in this particular movie where I shouldn't say that because there's scenes before this that do it too, but you really see how well this movie is timed to the music that is in the movie. And there's times where they do it and the characters in the movie are actually hearing the music and they're reacting to the music in cue with it. It's choreographed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other times like this where they're breaking down their plan to get to the pub, and it's almost like they shot it with the music in cue so they could move in beat to how the music plays. And it's got this like, that scene in particular, it's like got this like 70s cop show vibe when they're going from point A to point B, which just makes it feel really goofy at the same time you're dealing with all this, you know, crazy shit. So
yeah, and I think that's something Edgar Wright does really well, like in all these movies. I think the culmination of that whole thing is Baby Driver, right? I mean, that's like, it's almost like a musical.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard that.
Oh, I mean, you got to see that.
I still haven't seen that.
Yeah, you have to see that. But this movie, the use of music in this movie is really well done. There, like you said, there are pieces where the filming or things that they do are kind of surrounded by this music that kind of wraps it. And there are scenes in this movie where it is choreographed to music, like things that the characters are doing on screen are one-to-one with the music. And I think one of my favorite pieces like that is even at the beginning when they come out of the Winchester, out of the pub,
the white lines.
Yeah, when they want to come out, they come out and it's the first night. They don't know anything about this zombie apocalypse that's, you know, burgeoning, and they do this whole white lines. Was it Grandmaster Flash, like white lines?
Acapella.
What's that?
It's the acapella.
Yeah, and there's this zombie guy just like. They're singing the song and the guy groans like in between at the parts of the song where there's like they say a line, and they do like a what is that called? Not a call repeat, but call and answer kind of thing. Yeah, where they do it and the zombie guy like reacts to it.
And that was one of the jokes too that got once this did start having trailers on TV. That joke was in the trailer, and for a while I thought this joke would get really old really quick because it's one of those like. It's a good joke to put in the trailer because it is the kind of one that gets you an idea of like how the humor is in this movie. Mm-hmm. But if you hear it enough, you're like, this is going to get really old really quick. And I don't know, when I watched it the other day, I still laughed pretty hard at it. So it must be a really well written piece, or it's been long enough that I haven't watched it and it was funny again.
Yeah.
One of the two.
And I haven't seen this. I don't even remember the last time I'd actually seen this movie before we watched it for this. And I think for me, one thing about this movie is that it was so played, like it was on Comedy Central would play it, and I want to say like, and it was like a mainstay of Comedy Central. It was on all the time, and I want to say like shows like not necessarily Cartoon Network, but it feels like any kind of show or any kind of network or cable TV station that catered towards younger guys, you know, like Spike or whatever it was before that, would play this movie constantly. And
I'm sure it ended up on MTV at some point.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Via one of them.
Yeah. And I think it got to the point where I'd seen it so much that I just couldn't watch it anymore. But it was nice to have that break because then I realized watching this time just how funny, like little asides, little things that happen that aren't even necessarily intended to be called out as being funny, you know, like they don't wryly look at the camera and make like a face and give you a thumbs up. It's just It's just funny, like things that they say, the dialogue, just little things in the dialogue are really amusing.
It's also how they deliver the lines in the dialogue, like the famous fence scene that gets reused in every one of these movies. The way he does it is executed so perfectly, and he's so like confident and smug, and it's totally like at this point he's got his ex-girlfriend with him, and her idiot friends that he doesn't like, and everyone, he's trying to be the big man that's trying to save the day and just makes a total ass of himself. It's executed perfectly, it's delivered perfectly, and it 100% works.
Yeah, and I want to say that he was in that scene where he does the fence jump. So he goes up to the
fence fall.
Yeah, he goes up and he's going to like hop over this fence, basically just jump straight over it. And I want to say he does some heroic thing like right before this happens, doesn't he? Or he does something where he just comes across as being this really confident guy. And it's just this pratfall that happens that it just kind of like, it lets all the air out of that balloon that had just been blown up. So it's kind of genius in that way. Just little things like that in this movie are just the piece de resistance to the whole kind of story, all the comedy that's just sprinkled in here.
Well, and it's really good too, because with stuff like that and really how these characters interact with each other, for a movie that really doesn't spend a lot of time getting you to like before the zombies show up, you don't get a ton of like backstory on these characters. They don't spend too much time really like breaking down history or all that kind of crap with them, but the chemistry they built between these, was it 5-6 people that are in this like ragtag group of people trying to get to the pub, it plays out really well between it's pretty obvious that they probably had a good like relationship off the movie, because they just like dish it out to each other and do it flawlessly through the whole movie. But they also, with the exception of David, who's like the Harry Potter looking prick of the movie, they seem to really like genuinely care about each other, even though they give you the pretense that there's some bad things going on between these relationships. Shaun's relationship between him and his mom it's almost adorable, like through half the movie. And then, you know, the worst of it happens. That's really the only real like intense part of the movie, I'd say, is when eventually gets bitten. And it almost plays off like a little dramatic moment. I'm like, oh, they managed to put some actual like legit acting chops in the middle of this like goofy zombie comedy movie.
Yeah, I think both the parents kind of, this Philip, the stepfather, and the mom kind of meeting their ultimate demise, I guess, are the two really big emotional parts of this movie. And just to kind of go back a little bit, the way the movie starts is this pub scene where Shaun and Liz don't really break up at this point because there's like another step that goes on. Shaun just kind of is absent-minded. He's not really paying attention, and he just blows off something that he should have done. But at the beginning of the movies, there's just this short, like, I don't even know if it's 3 or 5 minute scene. It's probably 3 minutes, and it just sets up this relationship so well between the two groups, right? With Liz and her roommates or her flatmates or whatever, and Shaun and Ed, just kind of, you know, it shows a real dynamic between the group, and that is just kind of pushed throughout the whole movie when they're together. It's not to blow this movie too much, but it's really kind of masterful the way that they foreshadow, you know, all this stuff to come just with this little really short scene at the beginning of the movie, and it just sets everything up to work really well together.
This is a hard movie to really have like too much negative to say. I mean, the biggest things you could really pull as negatives on this is, more than likely, this movie is so easy and so fun to watch that it will hit points where you're like, I need a break from this movie for a long time. This, like, for me, this is in my, like, I've had too many to drink and I just want something stupid to watch, and I kind of pop this in, like, often. So I've seen it, you know, it sounds like more recently than you before this. But there's plenty of times, like you were saying, with it being on TV all the time, I would look at it and be like, I love that movie, but, like, you know, can't will myself to do it right now. And that's kind of the biggest, like, it's not even the fault of the movie, really. That's just the fault of the fact that they made a movie that's enjoyable, and, you know, you can't watch the same thing every day. Well, you can, but it gets old.
Yeah, I think it just entered the zeitgeist. It was so just...
It was fresh. It was different.
Well, yeah, but it was just everywhere. Like, you could not avoid seeing this for a period of time, especially if you were our age, kind of growing up when this movie came out. Not necessarily growing up, but you are our age and the movie comes out, you have cable TV, it's just on all the time. It's almost unavoidable.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't polled at my friends recently, but I don't know of all my friends if I have a friend, someone that I would consider like a close friend, that hasn't seen this movie.
I don't know if I've close friend or otherwise, if I've ever met someone who hasn't said they at least enjoyed this movie.
I don't know if I can go that far because I haven't polled everybody. I don't know if everybody really enjoyed this movie, because I'm sure some people that aren't into the genre, may have been forced to watch it for lack of a better term, and didn't enjoy it. But I think anybody that's really into this kind of whole subgenre of horror comedy or likes zombie movies, the thing that's really genius about it is that it has all those elements of a good zombie movie, minus you could take all the comedy out of it and it's still a good zombie movie. And with adding that comedy in there is just that extra thing that just puts it over the top of being like a total rewatchable movie, time over time over time.
I also think the story would be a mess, but you could take the zombie elements out of it and still have a really good comedy movie too. It would be weird, like you just have people making this weird trip like across the city to go to the bar. But I think the dialogue and the way that it's written, say you replace the zombies with, I don't know,
aliens,
angry cows or something. Yeah, whatever.
There has to be some kind of protagonist. There has to be some kind of bad force or something. Like you could say this is nuclear war or, Mad Max or bandits, medieval.
My point is the
dragons.
Comedy stands up just as well as the horror does.
Right. So. Yeah, it definitely stands. It needs both of those feet. It needs, or both legs. It needs the horror or some kind of antagonist or like opposing force. Right. But the comedy is just as strong as that other part of the storyline. There's
also, for the horror fans out there, a ton of fucking nods and Easter eggs just sprinkled through this entire movie. My favorites are always the Evil Dead cutaway scenes, like when he's spreading the jam on the toast, or when he brushes his teeth. The way they just do the quick little cuts on in Sam Raimi style, those always crack me up, because it's, a difference between like a chainsaw and like a bloody hand to like breakfast. There's a million callbacks to the Romero, like all the Romero films, like right from the beginning. They named Shaun's mom Barbara because of Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
And honestly, when Ed delivers the "We're coming to get you, Barbara" line, I think it's better than the Night of the Living Dead version, just because it's so goofy.
Yeah, it's
and
Nick Frost
works
delivering
really well.
it. So.
Right.
That helps it a little bit.
Yeah, and he over delivers it too, but it works so well. There's a lot of like really fun stuff about like the practical effects, like we mentioned. This does really like land. I'm sure there's some CG in here, but it's hard to pick out where it is. But I know one of them, the guy at the beginning who doesn't have an arm, like you actually see him at the beginning of the movie. They found a guy without an arm to actually play an extra with no arm.
He's like an armless. He's missing an arm, but he's a stunt man.
Yeah. Yeah. So they went the right route with that, which is great. And I like all the callbacks throughout the movie to things that they run into, things that you see once at one point in the movie and then it reappears at another point for either comedic or zombie stuff.
Almost everybody that you see in that the first act, that before the zombie stuff happens,
like 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, all those people come back. They're all zombies. Like later in the movie, you see them in scenes. They might be in the front of the zombie crowd, or they might just be like somebody they pan by, or somebody that you see again. I think the only real CGI that I can pick out that really sticks out in my mind are there's like scenes where certain zombies get impaled and they do this camera thing where they'll show through the body. That's clearly CGI. But other than that, maybe blood splatter or something is probably the most. But it seems like a majority of the effects in this movie are practical. That the fat zombie that you see at the beginning with the woman in the garden, you can tell he's got like some kind of thing on his face because it's different, way different color than the rest of his head. But I mean, that's probably the one thing that really sticks out as being kind of like, it's not great. But other than that, they're pretty good zombie effects for the rest of the movie.
Do you have a favorite scene in this movie, or favorite scenes that you want to mention?
I think some of my favorites are just kind of that planning sequence when they're kind of talking about their plan. What are we going to do? We need to go someplace that we're going to be safe, we're going to be able to defend, and that I can smoke at. So that rules out Liz's apartment. They can't bring him back to the house because that's already been kind of breached. But the Winchester, they have a real gun there. I mean, they have a rifle above the bar, but I heard it doesn't work. So, but yeah, I love that whole planning scene. That's probably one of my favorites. And the scene where they get, I didn't really remember this one until I remembered the driving stuff, but they take their other roommate's car, their other flatmate's car, to go to Shaun's mother's house. And it's weird that my name's Shaun and his name is Shaun. I keep forgetting that that's what his name is. I have to think about it. It's not Simon. It's not Simon Pegg. It's Shaun. But they They take
You could be on a first name basis with them. I don't mind.
Yeah, well, it's just hard. Nobody will know who the hell I'm talking about if I keep switching them up. But they take the roommate's car, the flatmate's car, and they go to the parents' house, and they have a Jag, which this Jag's probably slow as shit. It looks really big and heavy. But while Shaun is in the house talking to his mom and Philip, you hear all this like noise in the background. And when they come out, they're like, Shaun's like, says to Ed, "What happened to the car?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. Something happened." And you could see it's like basically wrapped around a pole, so they have to take the Jag. I love that scene. I think that's great. And then
like how he says, "Sewer Park." He goes, "Yeah,
yeah."
I would say the planning scene is one of my favorites, but the other one that always, and this is one that's iconic in this movie, would be the second trip to the bar when Queen comes on the jukebox. Is so well done, and it's so well choreographed, and it is by far, like, this is before Freddie Mercury was having his resurgence. Like, is the best use of a Queen song in, I'm sorry, Wayne's World. This is the best use of a Queen song in any movie ever. And then also, sorry to the new, was it Bohemian Rhapsody? Was that the name of the biopic?
Yeah, I was just thinking, what is that called? Is that called just Queen?
I think it's called Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. Yeah, but Don't Stop Me Now.
Yeah, Don't Stop Me Now. It's like the most happy, upbeat, like fun, it's almost a dance song.
Yeah.
And they literally just like club this big dude, like, who's, again, he's a stuntman that's in zombie makeup. So, he knows what he's getting into. They literally just club this guy for like the entire length of the song almost. And it is the most like chaotic, well choreographed, like zombie fight scene that I can think of. Including like the darts going into his head, him getting like, switched around and pushed into the jukebox, and then finally figuring out that the gun actually does work.
Right.
So,
and it's funny because it's England and they don't have as much of access to guns, and nobody like knows how to use it. And they're when they shoot,
right.
They're shooting all over the place. That's great. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was funny. That's the other thing about this movie is one of the notes I wrote down was that just how British it all is. Obviously, it's in England, it's in London. It's going to obviously be British, but I feel like other than 28 Days Later, maybe I'm not really thinking of all the movies in the zombie pantheon, but this is like one of the few that actually take place in London, in England itself. That 28 Days Later obviously does, and I think the next one, actually that one might be 28 Weeks.
It's
might
not
be
a zombie.
Yeah, well, okay.
28 Weeks is like in the countryside. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a ton more that we probably don't even know about.
Right. Sure.
Just because we're not there. Just like there's, all kinds of them. I'm sure that's a thing, but I can't think of any, like, just zombie movie. I don't even really consider 28 Days Later a zombie movie, because they're not really, well, that's
another debate for another day.
But yeah, I can't think of another zombie movie. I think of other horror movies that take place there.
Oh, sure.
But not a ton. Not as many as you would think.
Yeah, I just love how British it is. I love all the little sayings that they have. I don't know if did you watch when you watch this, or have you ever watched any of the commentaries with this?
I'm sure I have. I don't remember them at the moment, but I'm sure I have.
3 or 4 different commentary tracks on the DVD.
I have it on Blu-ray, so I don't know if it's on there, but I'm sure it is. I don't remember. I'm sure I have, because I actually find all 3 of the people that are like the leads, being Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost. Generally, if you want to put a microphone in front of them, I'll probably at least listen to what any one of those 3 people have to say, like more good than bad type thing. Mm-hmm. But I can't remember anything that's on. I know there's a ton of stuff where they kind of let you know how, like, tell you how the sauce is made through it. And I've heard a ton of stories about that over the years, like, but I don't remember anything more specific about the actual commentary track.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance. I was listening to the Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg one after I watched it. Like, immediately, I just restarted it, but I didn't get very far into it when it was kind of late.
You know what's funny about this? You mentioned, and I wanted to bring up being a British comedy too. It is very British, but it's also very dialed back by what you generally think. Like, well, I should maybe dial myself back. It's very dialed back for what Americans think of when they think of British comedy. This is not Monty Python or Fawlty Towers or any of that type of stuff. That's just, and that stuff has its place too. Like, I'm not going to act like I don't like Monty Python stuff, but it's not nearly that level of goofy and overpronounced and like human cartoony type stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, along the line of British comedy, if you are a fan of this movie, or if you've seen this movie and you like the comedy and you know the brand of comedy that they do, if you haven't seen Spaced, I would definitely recommend that too. That was on Netflix for quite a while. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but it's probably floating around streaming
I think it
somewhere.
might be on
Hulu or something.
So I thought I watched it on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong.
But I mean, Edgar Wright directs most
Yeah.
of those episodes, if not all of them.
I mean, I'll go as far right now to say that I think if Edgar Wright puts his name on something, I'm probably at least willing to give it a try, if nothing else.
Yeah.
He's more than proven himself to not only be a competent director, but he's also proven himself to take stories that I thought I would have no interest in at all and make extremely entertaining movies out of. Like, I think, not to sidetrack too far, but I thought Scott Pilgrim was going to be a total piece of garbage, and it is a fantastic movie. And I know there's a lot of things that go into a movie like that, but I think the biggest thing that goes into that is Edgar Wright being at the helm of it. So,
well, you can test that theory when Running Man comes out.
is he doing a Running Man?
He is. It's announced.
Like Hunger Games, like Arnold Schwarzenegger Running Man?
I'm gonna guess the futuristic United States of 2025, when the world has become a dystopia. So that sounds about right. We're on track.
Right. That makes brand. Where you put it on the hot dog scale?
I would say I would give this 8 hot dogs out of 12 dogs can't look up. I think it's a really complete
Damn
movie.
it, you beat me to that fucking. That was gonna be.
Yeah, you should have just given your rating. I just think it's a really great
No,
mix.
it wasn't gonna be that. That wasn't gonna be. Never mind.
Okay, well,
Anyway,
I think it's a good mix of comedy and horror. It like we said earlier,
Mhm.
you can't do in this movie. You can't have one without the other. It's not so serious that the horror elements just really push it over the top and being something that people that aren't into gory movies can't watch. I mean, it does have some gory elements to it. It does have some, maybe for some like more squeamish viewers, it might have one of those like cover your eyes kind of moments here or there, but it just balances it out really well. And I think that's what is so genius about this, like I said before, is that when there's a serious or a horror element, there's always a comedic element to break the ice or to kind of bring you back a little bit. It has this really good back and forth flow. And I think the thing that makes this such a good movie is that for people that aren't necessarily really big into horror, it's super accessible because of that comedic element.
so I'm gonna give it 8.5 hot dogs out of 2 dismembered legs used as weapons.
David,
This movie is, again, horror meets comedy.
Right.
Anytime that you can use a dismembered limb as a weapon, you should. Especially when the leg instantly gets rigor mortis for some reason. So, no, this movie is, as far as comedy movies go, I'd say this is one of my all-around favorites. I can't say that about it being a horror movie, but the horror elements make it just, for me, like, just infinitely great. Like, it's a fun watch. It really does hold up well. And again, I do get tired of it, which is why I can't grade it much or rate it much higher than that.
Yeah.
But, especially if you give it 12 months or so between like watching, if you get tired of it, 6-12 months, whatever it is, 6-12 years, whatever it takes, some sort of time travel in there. It absolutely is. It is not, it's just like putting on a Monty Python movie or Dumb and Dumber. It's one of those, it's like the jokes feel just as good and fresh and relevant in this as they ever did, or at any point. They never get old, and these are characters that they might or might not be relatable to, but they're so likable that it doesn't really matter. They're enjoyable to watch. To wrap it though, let me ask you, can dogs look up? That's where I was going to bring that up. I was kind of hoping you would forget about that little piece.
I mean, I would think that you have 2 dogs. I don't have any. So I would think that you would know much better than me, but I've been around enough dogs. I never really understood what that means. Like, is it some kind of inside joke that I'm just not getting, or is it just something that's said to kind of make you think that there's something that you're not getting?
I do like him holding the bloody dart that he just pulled out of his head and saying, but dogs can look up. This is what I've always wondered with it. When you say dogs can't look up, not you, but when
Right.
they say dogs can't look up, do they mean they can't move their head upwards and look up? Like, because my dogs do that. They chase things up a tree.
Sure.
And they're looking up in that
Howl
sense.
at the moon.
Or do you mean that? Yeah, that too. Well, they don't do that much, but yeah. Or do you mean like in the sense like from a peripheral sense, like can you move your eyes up and down and look up like that is? And I don't think they can do that, or if they can, they don't seem like they can do it.
Okay,
They don't respond.
we're going to go
to it.
totally off the rails here. Let me ask you, What when they're laying on the ground? What about when they're laying on the floor? On their stomachs with their paws out. Don't they like look around? Their eyes shift around. You can see a little eyebrows moving. They're looking up at that point.
Yeah, but their snout is up, so their whole head is pointing.
What do you
up.
mean their snout is up?
Googling, can dogs look up?
What do you mean their snout is up? Their
Like
heads are on the ground.
When mine are like doing that, they're facing upwards as far as the way they're looking. So I guess in that sense they can.
My parents have dogs, and whenever we're there and they're laying and they have their chin on the floor, their chin's on the floor, head's not moving. They're looking up. They're looking around.
According to Google, so Google says, conclusion. So dogs do look up, but they are unlikely to be able to in the same way that humans can. To say they can't is a myth. Dogs look up for different reasons, depending on their personality and experiences.
How stupid is this?
And yes, we have totally gone off the rails.
Yeah.
So to answer the question that everyone's asking, can dogs look up? Maybe.
Right. We don't know. Inconclusive.
Right. Inconclusive, but that's fine. So in the meantime, while you're, debating whether or not dogs can look up, again, this one is pretty high up there for our recommendations. We really got to start finding a movie that we don't like to complain more, but this one is worth watching and worth your time. Fun one all around. In the meantime, while you're watching that, follow us on all the social medias. We're at Dewey Pod Monster. Let us know what you think about this movie or this show. That'd be even better. You could find us on any platform that way. You've probably found our stream if you're listening to this, so I'm not even going to read that right now. Shaun, where are you at? Plug your plugs.
You can find me, at least some of my content, at youtube.drafttherapy.com. It'll take you to my YouTube channel where I talk about Michigan beer. Well, by the time you hear this, you'll probably realize that I haven't posted in a while. So I'm on a short self-imposed hiatus, a little mental health break. We'll see where this road takes us. But in the meantime, you can find me on all the social media at Draft Therapy.
What he's not telling you, he's taking a break to do the science to find out if dogs can look up.
That's right. I got to open the Draft Therapy lab. Last time we did pickles and beer. We're going to have to do can dogs look up?
I like this idea. This is a good thing. Science is good. We'll talk to you guys next week. Draft Therapy is on hiatus, but we are not. So we'll keep coming around with, all kinds of weird things to talk about. And maybe we'll have something a little bit newer to talk about next time you hear from us or whatever we're doing. Anyway, have a good week. I'll stop stumbling over my words for a minute or two.
Are you asking me for the recording, or are you asking me before I give you my official?
What's the difference?
I don't know. I can edit around. You didn't phrase it in a question. You didn't phrase it in the way that we usually talk about it. So I was like, oh, so are you asking because you want to shore up hot dogs or?
No. Where do you put this on your hot dog scale?